In the frost-kissed winter gardens of 1934, Amsterdam, a glittering gala hides a deadly secret. When brilliant botanist Elise Dubois is found stabbed in the orangerie, a silver letter opener in her chest and a crushed orchid petal at her side, Hercule Poirot's little gray cells spring to life. A vial of deadly poison, a stolen necklace, and a cast of suspects: greedy nephew Peter, cunning art dealer Johann, scandalous Lady Margaret, and secretive chemist Dr. Voss unravel a web of ambition and betrayal. As snow seals the glass-domed gardens, Poirot uncovers a chilling truth. Elise's discovery of a lethal plant extract threatened a hidden fortune, and one guest's greed led to murder. Can Poirot's brilliance bloom before the killer strikes again? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Amsterdam. The winter of 1934 had wrapped London in a shroud of frost, and Hercule Poirot, ensconced in his meticulously ordered flat at Whitehaven Mansions, felt the chill seeping through even the thickest drapes. The fire in the grate snapped valiantly, but it could not warm the disquiet in Poirot's heart, a disquiet born of idleness. His valet, George, moved with the silent precision of a Swiss clock, presenting a silver tray bearing a single letter. The envelope, cream-colored and embossed with a delicate crest, bore the elegant script of a feminine hand: Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Esquire. Poirot's gloved fingers slit the envelope with care, revealing a letter from Madame Clara van der Meer, a Dutch widow of considerable wealth and repute. She wrote of the grand reopening of the winter gardens of Amsterdam, a botanical masterpiece of glass and iron, famed for its rare blooms and opulent galas. Your reputation as a detective of unparalleled acumen precedes you, the letter read. I am hosting a gathering to celebrate the garden's restoration, but I fear discord among my guests. Your presence would bring me peace of mind. Will you come? Poirot's mustache quivered, a sure sign of intrigue. George, he said, adjusting his perfectly knotted tie. This invitation, it is not merely for a gala. Madame van der Meer speaks of discord, yet she is vague. The little gray cells, they sense a puzzle. To Amsterdam we shall go. The journey was a study in contrasts. The gray monotony of the Channel crossing gave way to the crystalline beauty of Amsterdam, its canals gleaming like silver ribbons under a pale winter sky. The winter gardens stood on the city's edge, a cathedral of glass that caught the weak sunlight and refracted it into 1,000 prisms. Poirot, bundled in his greatcoat, stepped from the taxi and surveyed the structure with approval. Magnifique, he murmured. A place of beauty, yet beauty often conceals danger. Madame Clara van der Meer awaited him in the grand foyer, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes sharp despite her 70 years. She wore a gown of midnight blue, its simplicity belying the diamond necklace that glittered at her throat. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice warm but tinged with strain. Your acceptance honors me. The winter gardens are my pride, but this gala, I fear it may unravel. Poirot inclined his head. Madame, you speak of fear. Tell me, what troubles you? Clara hesitated, her fingers brushing the diamonds. My guests are a volatile mix. There are rivalries, ambitions, secrets. I cannot say more without proof, but I trust your discernment. She handed him a list of the principal guests, and Poirot's eyes scanned the names with the precision of a jeweler examining a gem. First was Peter van der Meer, Clara's nephew, a man of 30 with a reputation for charm and a hunger for wealth that outstripped his modest inheritance. Next, Mademoiselle Elise Dubois, a French botanist whose brilliance was matched only by her acerbic wit. Dr. Hendrik Voss, a Dutch chemist, was noted for his obsessive study of rare plants, his reclusive nature a subject of local gossip. Lady Margaret Ashby, an English aristocrat, brought a whiff of scandal with her penchant for reckless liaisons. Finally, Johann de Vries, an art dealer whose charisma was as renowned as his questionable business dealings. Poirot folded the list, his mind already weaving connections. A gathering of such personalities, madame, is like a bouquet of exotic flowers, beautiful, but some may be poisonous. I shall observe. Clara led him through the gardens, where preparations for the gala were underway. Workers polished the glass panels, and gardeners tended to vibrant displays of orchids, roses, and strange, spiky blooms from distant lands. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and petals, and Poirot's senses sharpened. He noted the layout, the central palm house, the secluded orangery with its citrus groves, the rose gallery, and the locked greenhouse reserved for the rarest specimens. Each space offered opportunities for secrecy, or worse. As they paused by a display of snow-white lilies, Clara lowered her voice. "Monsieur Poirot, I have heard whispers of a discovery. One of my guests claims to have found something dangerous. I do not know who or what, but it unsettles me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A discovery, madame? In a garden, one unearths many things. Roots, secrets, motives. Fear not. Hercule Poirot shall be your eyes and ears." That evening, as he dressed for the gala, Poirot selected a pristine white shirt and a black tie, his appearance as immaculate as his thoughts. He sipped a tisane, its warmth steadying his resolve. The winter gardens awaited, a stage set for elegance and perhaps treachery. "The little gray cells," he said to his reflection. "They are ready. Let the curtain rise." Chapter 2. The Scream in the Orangerie. The winter gardens of Amsterdam glowed like a beacon in the frosty night, their glass domes scattering light across the snow-dusted grounds. Within, the gala was a symphony of elegance. Chandeliers cast golden beams over polished floors. The air hummed with the strains of a string quartet, and the scent of rare blooms mingled with the perfumes of the elite. Hercule Poirot, resplendent in his impeccable evening attire, stood near a towering palm in the central palm house, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. His mustache, perfectly waxed, betrayed no hint of the unease stirred by Madame Clara Vandermeer's cryptic warnings. The guests swirled about him, their laughter bright but their glances guarded, like players in a game whose rules were yet unclear. Madame Clara, radiant in her midnight blue gown, moved among her guests with the grace of a seasoned hostess, though Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hand as she greeted Lady Margaret Ashby. The English aristocrat, her auburn hair swept high and her crimson gown clinging to her form, laughed too loudly at a jest from Johann de Vries, the art dealer whose easy charm drew eyes like moths to a flame. Peter Vandermeer, Clara's nephew, hovered near a waiter, his handsome face taut with ambition, as he cast covetous glances at his aunt's diamond necklace. Dr. Hendrik Voss, the chemist, stood apart, his gaunt frame half hidden by a cluster of ferns, his gaze fixed on a display of rare orchids. Mademoiselle Elise Dubois, the French botanist, glided through the crowd, her emerald gown striking against her pale skin, her sharp tongue cutting through pleasantries with surgical precision. Poirot sipped his tisane, served in a delicate porcelain cup, and observed the undercurrents. Elise paused by the orchid display, engaging Dr. Voss in a heated exchange too low for others to hear, though Poirot noted the chemist's flushed cheeks and clenched fists. Lady Margaret, meanwhile, leaned close to Johann, her fingers brushing his sleeve, her smile laced with something more than flirtation. Peter, abandoning his post by the waiter, slipped toward the shadowed corridor leading to the orangerie, his movements furtive. "The stage is set," Poirot murmured, "and the actors, they play their parts too well." As the clock struck midnight, the quartet paused, and a hush fell over the Palm House. Then, a scream, piercing, raw, and unmistakably female, shattered the stillness. It came from the orangerie, a secluded wing where citrus trees flourished under glass. The guests froze, glasses poised, faces paling. Clara gasped, clutching Poirot's arm. "Mon Dieu, what is it?" she whispered. Poirot, his calm unshaken, set down his cup and strode toward the sound, the crowd parting before him like waves. The orangerie was a haven of green, its lemon and orange trees casting dappled shadows under the moonlight streaming through the glass ceiling. At its heart lay Elise Dubois, crumpled against a lemon tree, her emerald gown stained crimson. A silver letter opener, its handle intricately engraved, protruded from her chest, and her lifeless eyes stared upward, reflecting the cold, stars above. Blood pooled beneath her, seeping into the earth, and a single crushed orchid petal lay near her outstretched hand. The air carried a faint, acrid scent, not of citrus, but of something chemical, elusive yet unmistakable. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the scene, careful not to disturb it. "The letter opener," he said softly. "It is no mere trinket. Its blade is honed, deliberate. This was no act of passion, but of calculation." He leaned closer, his nose twitching at the chemical odor. "And this smell, curieux, it is not natural to this place." He noted the orchid petal, its delicate white form crushed as if trodden underfoot, and his eyes narrowed. A clue, perhaps, left by chance or design. Clara, trembling behind him, whispered, "Monsieur Poirot, who could do this?" The other guests crowded at the entrance, their faces a gallery of shock and suspicion. Lady Margaret clutched Johann's arm, her bravado gone. Peter's eyes darted nervously, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Dr. Voss, pale as death, stared at Elise's body with an intensity that bordered on fascination. Johann alone seemed composed, though his charm had dimmed, his gaze flickering to the exits. Inspector Van Dyck, a stout man with a bristling mustache and the air of one who preferred paperwork to puzzles, arrived with 2 constables. His Dutch pragmatism clashed with Poirot's finesse as he barked orders to seal the orangerie. "No one leaves the Winter Gardens," he declared, his voice heavy with authority. "This is a crime scene." Poirot rose, brushing his knees with a handkerchief. "Inspector, with respect, it is more than a crime scene. It is a stage, and the murderer is still among us." He turned to the guests, his voice clear and commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, I, Hercule Poirot, shall assist the good inspector. Each of you will be questioned. The truth it hides, but not from me." He began with Clara, drawing her aside to a bench beneath a flowering orange tree. "Madame, tell me of Mademoiselle Dubois. She was not merely a guest, non?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. Elise was brilliant but reckless. She came to study our rare plants, claiming she had uncovered a secret, a poison derived from a South American species. She spoke of it openly, boasting of its potency. I warned her to be discreet, but she laughed. Poirot's mustache twitched. A poison, you say? And who knew of this discovery? Clara hesitated. Dr. Voss, certainly. They collaborated on botanical research. Perhaps others overheard her. She was not subtle. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on Voss, who now stood by the entrance, his hands twisting a handkerchief. The chemist's eyes met Poirot's for a moment before darting away. "Merci, madame," Poirot said. "Your candor is a light in this darkness." He approached the body again, ignoring Van Dyck's grumbling about procedure. The letter opener's handle bore the initials CVDM, Clara's own. Borrowed or stolen, Poirot mused, to cast suspicion or to seize opportunity. He examined Elise's hands, noting a faint smudge of soil on her fingers, as if she had grasped at the earth in her final moments. The crushed orchid petal, he realized, was no accident. It belonged to a Phalaenopsis amabilis, a species kept under lock and key in the restricted greenhouse. As the constables began herding guests back to the Palm House, Poirot lingered, his mind racing. The chemical odor, the orchid, the letter opener, these were not random. They were threads in a tapestry woven by a careful hand. "The killer," he said to himself, "is clever, but not cleverer than Hercule Poirot." He rejoined the guests, their faces now masks of fear and calculation. The gala's glamour had vanished, replaced by the cold reality of murder. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with purpose. The night is young, he thought, and the truth, it waits to be unearthed. Chapter 3. The motives unfold. The morning after the murder cast a pall over the winter gardens, its glass domes dulled by a sky heavy with unshed snow. Hercule Poirot stood in the Palm House, where the towering fronds arched like silent sentinels over the gathered guests. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and exotic blooms, carried a tension that prickled the skin. The guests, confined to the gardens by Inspector Van Dyck's orders, sat in a semicircle of velvet-upholstered chairs, their faces etched with unease. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, paced before them, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the tiled floor. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, missed nothing, not the quiver of Peter van der Meer's lip, nor the restless tapping of Lady Margaret Ashby's fan, nor the faint sheen of sweat on Dr. Hendrik Voss's brow. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a calm blade cutting through the silence. "A crime has been committed, and the murderer is among us. Each of you had the opportunity to enter the orangerie last night. Each of you, I suspect, has a secret. I, Hercule Poirot, shall uncover it. Let us begin." He turned first to Pieter van der Meer, whose boyish charm was overshadowed by the shadows beneath his eyes. "Monsieur Pieter, you were seen near the orangerie before the scream. Where were you when Mademoiselle Dubois met her fate?" Pieter shifted, his fingers twisting the cuff of his jacket. "I was with a waiter, discussing wine. Ask him, Jean, his name was. He'll confirm it." His voice carried a bravado that faltered under Poirot's gaze. The waiter, a lanky youth with nervous eyes, nodded hesitantly when summoned, but his glance darted to Peter, as if seeking approval. Poirot's mustache twitched. "A convenient alibi, monsieur, but fragile. We shall see." Next, Poirot approached Dr. Voss, who stood by a cluster of palms, his thin frame hunched as if bearing an invisible weight. "Doctor, You were studying a night blooming Sirius, you say, at the hour of the murder. Yet I observe soil beneath your fingernails, unusual for a chemist who claims to avoid the dirt of gardening. Voss's eyes widened, and he rubbed his hands together as if to erase the evidence. I examined a specimen earlier, he stammered. The Sirius is delicate, rare. I was distracted by my work. Poirot noted a faint tremor in the man's voice and a peculiar stain on his sleeve. Not soil, but something darker, perhaps chemical. Distracted, monsieur, or preoccupied with other matters? Lady Margaret Ashby, seated with a posture that suggested defiance, met Poirot's scrutiny with a raised chin. Her fan snapped shut as she spoke. I was in the rose gallery, admiring the blooms. The winter gardens are exquisite, are they not? Her smile was polished, but Poirot detected a flicker of unease. The rose gallery, madame, is but a step from the orangerie. One might slip through the shadows unnoticed, and your admiration for Monsieur de Vries, did it keep you in the gallery or draw you elsewhere? Her cheeks flushed, and she glanced at Johann de Vries, who lounged with an air of studied nonchalance. I resent the implication, she said, but her voice wavered, betraying her. Johann de Vries was next, his charm undimmed by the grim circumstances. Monsieur Poirot, I was negotiating a sale with a guest, a minor collector not worth naming. Art, you see, demands my attention even at a gala. His smile was disarming, but Poirot's eyes narrowed. A collector who cannot be found, monsieur? Your negotiations, they lack witnesses. Curious, no? Johann's smile held, but his fingers tightened on his glass. Poirot then turned to Madame Clara, who stood apart, her diamond necklace catching the light like a beacon. In a private aside, she leaned close, her voice low. Monsieur Poirot, Elise was more than a botanist. She was reckless, driven. She spoke of a discovery, a poison from a rare plant, potent enough to kill with a single drop. She believed it could revolutionize medicine, but I feared its misuse. She confided in me that others knew, Dr. Voss certainly, and perhaps someone else she would not name. Poirot's mind seized on this. A poison, madame. This changes the tableau. Who else might have overheard her boasts? Clara shook her head, her eyes haunted. She was careless, speaking freely at dinners, lectures. Anyone here could have known. Poirot nodded, his thoughts racing. The poison, the letter opener, the crushed orchid petal. These were pieces of a puzzle, each pointing to a motive rooted not in passion, but in fear of exposure. As the interviews concluded, Inspector Van Dyck approached, his face dour. Monsieur Poirot, my men have searched the orangerie. No further clues save the letter opener, which belongs to Madame van der Meer. He held up the weapon, now encased in a cloth, its silver glinting accusingly. Clara gasped. It was on my desk in the study. Anyone could have taken it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Indeed, madam, the thief chose it to mislead, or to implicate. He dismissed the guests, instructing them to remain within the gardens. As they dispersed, Poirot lingered in the Palm House, his gaze drawn to a display of rare ferns, their fronds curling like secrets. The waiter, Jean, hovered nearby, polishing a glass with excessive care. Poirot approached, his voice gentle but probing. Young man, you confirm Monsieur Pieter's story, yet your eyes betray you. Speak truthfully. Did he pay you? Jean's hands shook, and he nodded, barely audible. He gave me a guilder to say he was with me, but he wasn't. I saw him go toward the orangerie, then return, looking frightened. Poirot's lips curved slightly. Merci, Jean. The truth, it begins to emerge. He dismissed the boy and stood alone, his mind weaving the threads of testimony. Peter's lie, Voss's soiled hands, Lady Margaret's evasions, Johann's phantom alibi, and Elise's dangerous discovery. Each was a note in a discordant symphony. The poison, he suspected, was the key. But why kill with a letter opener when a drop could suffice? The answer lay in deception, in a mind that sought to obscure its true intent. Outside, the snow began to fall, cloaking the winter gardens in silence. Poirot adjusted his scarf, his little gray cells humming. "The murderer," he murmured, "is clever, but they underestimate Hercule Poirot. The motives, they unfold, and the truth, it draws near." Chapter 4. The Clue in the Greenhouse. The winter gardens, bathed in the pale light of a winter noon, seemed to hold their breath as Hercule Poirot retraced his steps to the orangerie. The snow outside had thickened, veiling Amsterdam in a hush that contrasted with the turmoil within. The orangerie, still cordoned off by Inspector Van Dyck's constables, was a silent witness to Elise Dubois's final moments. Poirot, his greatcoat draped over his arm, moved with deliberate care, his eyes scanning the citrus grove where the botanist's body had lain. The bloodstain had darkened on the earth, and the lemon tree above stood sentinel, its branches heavy with unripe fruit. The faint chemical odor he had noted the previous night lingered, teasing his senses like a half-forgotten memory. Poirot's attention returned to the crushed orchid petal, a delicate Phalaenopsis amabilis that had no business in the orangerie. Its presence gnawed at him, a deliberate clue or a careless mistake. He summoned Klaas, the head gardener, a stooped man with hands gnarled from years tending the garden's treasures. Klaas's weathered face creased as he examined the petal Poirot presented. "This is from the restricted greenhouse, monsieur," he said, his Dutch accent thick. "The Phalaenopsis is kept under lock and key. Too rare, too delicate for public display. Only Mademoiselle Dubois and Dr. Voss had access. The lock was not forced. I checked this morning." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A locked greenhouse, yet the petal is here. Most interesting. Show me this place, Monsieur Klaas." The gardener led him through a maze of glass corridors to a small, fortified greenhouse, its door secured with a heavy iron lock. Inside, rows of orchids bloomed in unearthly hues, their fragility belying their value. Poirot's meticulous gaze swept the shelves, noting the orderly pots and labeled specimens. Then, tucked behind a cluster of Cattleya orchids, he spotted a glint of glass, a vial, half hidden, its contents colorless but ominous. He donned his gloves and retrieved the vial, holding it to the light. The label, scrawled in a hurried hand, read, "Extract of Atropa belladonna, deadly nightshade." The chemical odor matched the one near Elise's body, sharp and unnatural. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "A poison, concealed yet not destroyed. The killer is bold, but not infallible." He pocketed the vial, intending to present it to Inspector Van Dyck, though he suspected the stolid policeman would miss its significance. Klaas, watching nervously, ventured, "Mademoiselle Dubois was often here, studying the plants. She and Dr. Voss argued sometimes about her experiments, her recklessness. She wanted to publish something. He didn't." Poirot nodded, filing away the gardener's words. "And who else came here, monsieur?" Klaas shook his head. "No one, without a key. But I saw Peter van der Meer lingering nearby yesterday, before the gala. He asked about the orchids, said he wanted to impress his aunt. Poirot's mustache quivered. Pieter, always the opportunist. Merci, Klaus. You have been most helpful. He dismissed the gardener and stood alone in the greenhouse, the silence broken only by the faint drip of condensation from the glass ceiling. The vial, the petal, the locked door. These pointed to a calculated act, but the letter opener puzzled him. Why stab when poison was at hand? The answer, he suspected, lay in misdirection, a flourish to confuse the stage. Returning to the Palm House, Poirot sought Dr. Voss, who was hunched over a notebook in a corner, his pen scratching furiously. The chemist's gaunt face paled as Poirot approached, the vial now concealed in Poirot's pocket. "Monsieur Voss," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "You and Mademoiselle Dubois shared access to the restricted greenhouse. This Atropa belladonna extract. Was it part of your work together?" Voss's pen froze, and a bead of sweat traced his temple. "I study plants for science, not poison," he snapped. Elise was reckless, mixing compounds without care. If she had such a vial, it was her doing. Poirot's eyes fixed on the chemist's sleeve, where the dark stain he had noted earlier was joined by a fresh mark. A burn, red and raw, as if from a chemical spill. "And this burn, monsieur, a mishap in your laboratory perhaps, or from handling something dangerous?" Voss tugged his cuff down, his voice rising. "A trivial accident. You accuse me unjustly, Poirot." But his eyes betrayed panic, and Poirot noted the tremor in his hands, so unlike the steady grip of a scientist. Leaving Voss, Poirot reflected on the web of lies. Peter's false alibi, exposed by the waiter, placed him near the orangerie, perhaps seeking his aunt's necklace, but stumbling upon more. Voss's expertise with chemicals aligned too neatly with the vial's contents, and his agitation suggested guilt or fear. Lady Margaret's proximity to the orangerie, cloaked by her flimsy alibi, and Johann's unverifiable negotiations added further shadows to the tableau. Yet the poison intrigued Poirot most. Elise's discovery, boasted carelessly, threatened someone's secrets, and the greenhouse held the key. He sought out Madame Clara, finding her in the rose gallery, her face drawn as she gazed at a crimson bloom. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "this tragedy stains my gardens. Have you found anything?" Poirot chose his words carefully. "Madame, a clue has emerged, a vial of poison, hidden where only a few could reach. Tell me, did Mademoiselle Dubois ever speak of enemies, someone who feared her work?" Clara's fingers tightened on her shawl. She was bold, unafraid. She hinted once that her findings could ruin a reputation, but she named no one. "I thought it mere bravado." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The poison was not used, yet it was present. The letter opener, it was a distraction, meant to obscure the true intent. But whose? He excused himself, his thoughts turning to the greenhouse's lock. Only Voss and Elise had keys, yet Peter had been seen nearby. A thief, a scientist, or another? The puzzle was intricate, but Poirot's little gray cells thrived on such challenges. As evening approached, the winter gardens grew colder, the snow outside piling against the glass. Poirot stood by a window, his reflection sharp against the darkening sky. "The killer," he murmured, "believes they have outwitted us. But the clues, they speak, and Hercule Poirot listens. The vial, the petal, the burn, they were threads in a tapestry, and he was determined to unravel it before another thread snapped. Chapter 5. The alibi crumbles. The winter gardens, under the weight of a gathering snowstorm, seemed to close in upon themselves, their glass walls amplifying the tension that pulsed through the assembled guests. Hercule Poirot, standing in the fern room with its lush, feathery fronds, felt the air heavy with secrets. The afternoon light, filtered through snow-laden clouds, cast a ghostly pallor over the scene, and the distant hum of Amsterdam's canals was silenced by the storm. Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, had resolved to probe deeper into the web of alibis, for he sensed the killer's confidence fraying like a worn tapestry. The vial of Atropa belladonna, the crushed orchid petal, and the stolen letter opener were pieces of a puzzle, but it was the human heart, its greed, fear, and deception that held the key. He began with Lady Margaret Ashby, whom he invited for a private conversation beneath the arching ferns. Her crimson gown had been replaced by a somber gray dress, but her eyes still sparked with defiance. She sat, her fan idle in her lap, as Poirot fixed her with his unyielding gaze. "Madame," he said, his voice soft but incisive, "you claim you were in the Rose Gallery at the time of Mademoiselle Dubois' death. Yet the gallery lies but a whisper from the orangerie. A moment's step through the shadows could place you at the scene. Tell me, what drew you so close to danger?" Lady Margaret's lips tightened, and she glanced away, her fingers brushing the edge of her fan. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was admiring the roses. The winter gardens are a marvel, and I sought a moment's solitude." Her tone was polished, but Poirot detected a tremor, like a note struck falsely on a piano. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Solitude, madame, or a rendezvous? Your familiarity with Monsieur de Vries has not gone unnoticed. Was he with you, or were you elsewhere, perhaps witnessing more than you admit?" Her cheeks flushed, and for a moment her composure cracked. "Very well," she said, her voice low. "I was with Johann, briefly, in the Rose Gallery. We spoke of a painting, a private matter, but I swear I saw nothing of Elise's death. I was not in the orangerie." Poirot's mustache quivered. "A painting, madame, or a pretext? Your story shifts like sand. I wonder what else you conceal." She rose, her eyes flashing, but said no more, retreating with a rustle of silk. Poirot's next target was Peter van der Meer, whose flimsy alibi had already been undermined by the waiter Jan's confession. He found Peter in the Palm House, pacing near a display of towering palms, his face pale, and his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Monsieur Pieter," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "your alibi has crumbled. The waiter admits you paid him to lie. You were not with him at the time of the murder. Where were you? And what did you see?" Peter's eyes darted, and he ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I lied, yes," he stammered. "I was in the orangerie, but not to kill Elise. I wanted Aunt Clara's necklace. It's worth a fortune. I thought during the gala I could slip into her study and take it, but when I passed through the orangerie, I saw Elise, alive, arguing with someone in the shadows. I couldn't see who, only a figure, tall, moving quickly. I panicked and fled." His voice broke, and he looked at Poirot with desperate eyes. "I'm a thief, maybe, but not a murderer." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "A thief, monsieur, is but a step from darker deeds. This figure you saw, man or woman, what did you hear?" Peter shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. I couldn't tell. They were speaking low, angry. Elise said something about exposing the truth. I didn't stay to hear more. Poirot nodded, filing away the detail. You have been unwise, monsieur, but perhaps truthful. For now. As Peter slunk away, Poirot's thoughts turned to Johann de Vries, whose charm masked a slippery evasiveness. He found the art dealer in the corridor leading to the Rose Gallery, studying a vase of lilies with an air of calculated distraction. Monsieur de Vries, Poirot said, your alibi, a negotiation with an unnamed collector, lacks substance. No one saw you. Were you perhaps with Lady Margaret, as she now claims, or elsewhere, closer to the orangerie? Johann's smile was smooth, his eyes cool. Lady Margaret speaks the truth. We were together, discussing a painting, a rare Vermeer, if you must know. A private transaction, not for public ears. I was nowhere near the orangerie. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A Vermeer, monsieur? Conveniently vague. And yet your presence in the Rose Gallery places you near the scene. A man of your resourcefulness might find opportunity in chaos. Johann's smile held, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the vase. Poirot returned to the orangerie, where Inspector Van Dyck was overseeing the removal of Elise's body. The inspector, his face etched with frustration, approached. Monsieur Poirot, we've found nothing new. The letter opener is Madame van der Meer's, but no fingerprints, wiped clean. The chemical odor you mentioned? My men smell nothing. Poirot's lips curved slightly. Your men, Inspector, lack the nose of Hercule Poirot. The odor was faint but present, and it matches the vial I found. Have you questioned the staff about visitors to the restricted greenhouse? Van Dyck grunted. The gardener, Klaas, insists only Voss and Dubois had keys. No one else was seen there. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The vial of Atropa belladonna, the locked greenhouse, Peter's shadowy figure, Lady Margaret's shifting story. These were threads, but the pattern remained elusive. Elise's talk of exposing the truth suggested her poison discovery threatened more than reputations, perhaps a hidden enterprise. As evening fell, the snow thickened, sealing the winter gardens in a cocoon of white. Poirot stood by a window in the Palm House, his reflection sharp against the glass. The killer, he murmured, weaves a clever web, but they have left threads dangling. The truth, it is close, and Hercule Poirot shall seize it. Chapter 6. The Shadow of Greed. The winter gardens, now shrouded in the deepening gloom of an Amsterdam evening, seemed to pulse with secrets as the snowstorm raged outside. The glass domes, frosted with ice, cast eerie patterns across the tiled floors, and the air within grew heavy with the scent of damp foliage and unspoken fears. Hercule Poirot, standing in the Rose Gallery amidst a profusion of crimson and white blooms, felt the threads of the mystery tightening. The vial of Atropa belladonna, Peter's confession, Lady Margaret's wavering alibi, and Johann's slippery charm all pointed to a motive rooted not in passion, but in cold, calculated gain. Elise Dubois's murder, he sensed, was no impulsive act but a desperate move to silence a dangerous truth. Poirot's first task was to confront Dr. Hendrik Voss, whose chemical expertise and nervous demeanor made him a focal point of suspicion. He found the chemist in a small laboratory adjacent to the restricted greenhouse, surrounded by vials, burners, and the sharp tang of chemicals. Voss was hunched over a microscope, his thin fingers trembling as he adjusted the lens. The burn mark on his cuff, now partially hidden by a fresh bandage, caught Poirot's eye. "Monsieur Voss," Poirot said, his voice a velvet blade. "Your work with Mademoiselle Dubois was more than academic, no? Her discovery of a poison, your poison, perhaps, threatened to expose something you wished to keep hidden." Voss's head snapped up, his eyes wild. "You accuse me without proof, Poirot. Elise was reckless. Yes, mixing compounds that could ruin us both. But I did not kill her." His voice cracked, and he gestured to a stack of notebooks. "Our work was for medicine, not murder. She wanted to publish, to claim glory, but I urged caution, that's all." Poirot's gaze lingered on the bandage. "And this burn, monsieur, from a chemical spill, you say, yet it coincides with the discovery of a deadly extract. A coincidence or a mark of guilt?" Voss clutched the edge of the table, his face ashen. "An accident, nothing more. I handle dangerous substances daily. You twist everything." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes piercing. "The vial in the greenhouse, monsieur, was not Elise's alone. You had access, knowledge, and motive. Did her threat to expose your work drive you to silence her?" Voss's denial was vehement, but his shaking hands betrayed him, and Poirot noted a faint chemical scent on his breath, matching the odor near Elise's body. Leaving Voss, Poirot sought Madame Clara Vandermeer, who was in the Palm House, overseeing the removal of wilted flowers as if to restore order to her tarnished domain. Her diamond necklace, now locked away after Peter's confession, no longer adorned her throat, but her eyes held a weary resolve. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "this tragedy consumes me. Have you found the truth?" Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, the truth emerges, but it is tangled. Tell me, did Mademoiselle Dubois ever hint that her discovery involved more than science? Perhaps a trade, a profit?" Clara's brow furrowed. She spoke of her work as revolutionary, but once, in confidence, she mentioned a market for her findings. I thought she meant academic circles, but now I wonder if she crossed someone dangerous. Poirot's mind seized on this. A market implied commerce, and commerce suggested Johann de Vries, whose art dealings often skirted legality, or even Peter, whose greed for Clara's wealth was clear. Poirot's next move was to re-examine the orangerie, now empty save for a constable guarding the door. The bloodstain had been cleaned, but the lemon tree remained, its branches casting long shadows. Poirot knelt where Elise had fallen, his gloved fingers tracing the earth. The crushed orchid petal was gone, collected as evidence, but he recalled its significance, a link to the restricted greenhouse. He closed his eyes, reconstructing the scene. Elise arguing, the shadowy figure Peter described, the letter opener's swift strike. The chemical odor lingered in his memory, tying the vial to the crime, yet the weapon puzzled him. "Why stab?" he murmured, "when poison is silent? To mislead, oui, but also to protect." He sought out Inspector Van Dyck, who was in the foyer reviewing notes with a scowl. "Monsieur Poirot, this case grows murkier. The waiter, Jan, has vanished, left the gardens this morning, against orders, and the letter opener yields no clues. It was wiped clean." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Jan's disappearance, Inspector, confirms his fear. He knows more than he told. And the letter opener, its cleanliness is itself a clue. The killer planned, yet acted in haste." Poirot's thoughts turned to Johann de Vries, whose absence from the orangerie was unproven. He found the art dealer in the corridor near the fern room, adjusting his cufflinks with a studied calm. "Monsieur de Vries," Poirot said, "your negotiations with this mysterious collector remain unverified. Were you perhaps aware of Mademoiselle Dubois' discovery? A man of your connections might see profit in such a poison." Johann's smile was a mask. "You flatter my enterprise, Poirot. I deal in art, not poisons. My time was spent with Lady Margaret, as she confirmed." Poirot pressed further. "And this Vermeer you discussed, where is it now? A convenient fiction, no?" Johann's eyes flickered, but he held his ground. "A private sale, monsieur. You'll find no crime there." As night fell, the winter gardens grew colder, the snow sealing them in a crystalline prison. Poirot stood alone in the Palm House, his mind weaving the threads. Voss's chemical expertise, Peter's greed, Johann's evasions, Lady Margaret's proximity, and Elise's threat to expose a lucrative secret. The poison was the heart of it, he was certain, but the letter opener suggested a killer who feared the poison's traceability. "The shadow of greed," he whispered. "It darkens all." But Hercule Poirot sees through the shadows. He resolved to gather the guests once more, to press them until the truth broke free. The killer, he knew, was growing restless, and a restless mind makes mistakes. The little gray cells hummed, and Poirot's resolve hardened. The stage was set for the final act. Chapter 7. The Unveiling. The winter gardens, entombed in snow, stood as a glittering fortress under the Amsterdam night, their glass domes reflecting the flickering torches that lit the Palm House. Hercule Poirot had summoned the guests to this verdant sanctuary, where towering palms loomed like silent judges over the assembly. The air was thick with the scent of earth and anticipation, the storm outside muffling all but the crackle of tension among the gathered. Madame Clara van der Meer stood by a marble fountain, her face pale but resolute. Peter van der Meer slouched in a chair, his eyes darting nervously. Lady Margaret Ashby clutched her shawl, her poise fraying. Johann de Vries leaned against a pillar, his charm a thin veneer over unease. Dr. Hendrik Voss, gaunt and trembling, stood apart, his bandaged arm betraying his agitation. Inspector Van Dyck, flanked by 2 constables, watched with a scowl, his patience worn thin by Poirot's theatrics. Poirot paced before them, his patent leather shoes clicking on the tiles, his mustache immaculate despite the late hour. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and commanding. "A murder has been committed in this garden of beauty, and the killer stands among us. Mademoiselle Elise Dubois was silenced not for love nor for hate, but for knowledge. Knowledge that threatened a secret most profitable. I, Hercule Poirot, have unraveled the threads of this crime, and now the truth shall bloom." He turned to the group, his eyes piercing. "Let us reconstruct. Mademoiselle Dubois discovered a poison derived from a rare plant, potent and deadly. She boasted of its power, heedless of the danger. This poison, found in a vial of Atropa belladonna in the restricted greenhouse, was the heart of the motive. But why, you ask, was she killed with a letter opener when poison was at hand? The answer is simple. Misdirection. The killer wished to obscure their true intent, to make the act seem impulsive, personal. Yet the little gray cells, they see through such ruses. Poirot paused by Peter, whose hands clenched the arms of his chair. "Monsieur Pieter, you admitted to entering the orangerie, seeking your aunt's necklace. You saw Mademoiselle Dubois arguing with a shadowy figure, speaking of exposing the truth. Your greed placed you at the scene, but your cowardice spared you the act of murder. You fled, yes? Peter nodded, his face ashen, offering no protest. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Margaret. Madame Ashby, your presence in the Rose Gallery, so near the Orangerie, was convenient. Your liaison with Monsieur de Vries, a distraction or a cover. Yet your story holds, for now, as no evidence places you at the scene. Lady Margaret's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained wary. He turned to Johann de Vries, whose smile was a fragile mask. Monsieur de Vries, your negotiations with an unseen collector are as elusive as a phantom. A man of your enterprise might profit from a poisons trade, yet no trace links you directly to the greenhouse. Your charm? It conceals, but not enough to deceive Poirot. Johann's smile faltered, but he held his silence. Finally, Poirot faced Dr. Voss, whose trembling had intensified, his eyes darting to the exits. Monsieur Voss, Poirot said, his voice now a scalpel. You are the key. You collaborated with Mademoiselle Dubois on her poison, a discovery meant for medicine but ripe for misuse. She planned to publish, to expose your work tied to an illegal trade in rare plants, a trade that enriched you through secret channels. The vial in the greenhouse, poorly hidden, was yours. The chemical odor near her body, it matched the Atropa belladonna and the burn on your arm. A burn from handling the extract, non? Voss's face crumpled, and he staggered back. No, it was her idea, her recklessness. She would have ruined me. His voice rose to a wail. The poison was for research, but she wanted fame, to publish everything. I begged her to stop, but she laughed, said she'd tell the world. In the Orangerie, we argued. She threatened to expose my dealings. I took the letter opener from Clara's desk. I didn't think, I just struck. He sank to his knees, sobbing. It was a moment of madness, Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lady Margaret turned away, and Peter stared, stunned. Johann's mask of charm slipped, revealing a flicker of relief. Inspector Van Dyke stepped forward, his cuffs gleaming in the torchlight. Dr. Voss, you are under arrest, he said, his voice gruff but satisfied. The constables led Voss away, his sobs echoing through the Palm House. Poirot turned to Clara, his expression softening. Madame, your gardens are cleansed of this shadow. The truth, it is painful, but necessary. Clara clasped his hand, tears in her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, you have saved us from further darkness. How can I thank you? He bowed, his eyes twinkling. The thanks, madame, is in the order restored. The little gray cells, they demand no more. As the guests dispersed, their relief palpable, Poirot lingered, gazing at the palms. The poison, the letter opener, the orchid petal, all had pointed to Voss, whose greed and fear had undone him. The shadowy figure Peter saw was Voss, the chemical burn his betrayal, the vial his mistake. The puzzle was complete, and Poirot's heart was content. Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the winter gardens in peace. The truth had bloomed, as Poirot knew it would, and the stage was set for his departure. Chapter 8. Epilogue. The snow had ceased its relentless fall, leaving Amsterdam cloaked in a pristine silence, as Hercule Poirot prepared to depart the winter gardens. The glass domes, now dusted with white, caught the first rays of a tentative dawn, their beauty restored by the unmasking of Dr. Hendrik Voss's crime. The Palm House, where the truth had been unveiled hours before, stood serene, its towering fronds whispering of secrets laid bare. Poirot, his greatcoat buttoned against the chill, stood in the foyer, his suitcase at his side, awaiting the taxi that would carry him to the station. His mustache, impeccably waxed, gleamed in the soft light, a testament to his unyielding precision. Madame Clara Vandermeer approached, her face weary but relieved, her silver hair catching the glow of a nearby lamp. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice warm with gratitude. "You have brought light to this dark affair. The winter gardens are my sanctuary, and you have preserved their honor." She extended a gloved hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "How can I ever repay you?" Poirot bowed, his hand brushing hers lightly. "Madame, the repayment is in the truth, which restores order to chaos. Your gardens will bloom anew, free of the shadow of greed. That is enough for Hercule Poirot." He paused, his gaze softening. "But perhaps, Madame, a small box of those exquisite Dutch chocolates for my journey?" Clara laughed, a sound like the chime of a bell, and promised to send them to his London address. As he waited, Poirot reflected on the tapestry of motives and clues that had unraveled before his little gray cells. Elise Dubois's reckless ambition, her discovery of a deadly poison, had threatened Voss's illicit trade in rare plants, a trade that promised wealth but demanded secrecy. The vial of Atropa belladonna, carelessly hidden, had betrayed him, as had the chemical burn on his arm and the crushed orchid petal, a silent witness to his presence in the orangery. Peter's greed, Lady Margaret's flirtations, and Johann's evasions had clouded the truth, but Poirot's clarity had cut through the fog. The letter opener, stolen from Clara's desk, was a desperate improvisation meant to mask the poison's role and mislead the investigation. Yet no deception could withstand the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot. Inspector Van Dyck appeared, his dour expression softened by a grudging respect. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, adjusting his cap, "you've made my work easier, though I'll not admit it often. Voss is in custody, confessing more with every hour. He'd been selling plant extracts to unsavory buyers, and Dubois's publication would have exposed him." Poirot nodded, his eyes twinkling. "Inspector, the police are the backbone of justice, but the little gray cells, they provide the finesse. I trust you will manage the rest." Van Dyck grunted, a hint of a smile breaking through. "We'll manage. Safe travels, Poirot." He turned away, barking orders to a constable, and Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The truth had been served, and order restored. The taxi arrived, its headlights cutting through the dawn. Mist. As Poirot stepped outside, the winter gardens loomed behind him, their glass sparkling like a promise of renewal. He climbed aboard, settling into the seat with a sigh, and drew out his silver cigarette case, though he did not light one. Instead, he opened a small thermos of tisane, its warmth a comfort against the cold. "The little gray cells," he murmured, sipping the fragrant brew. "They never fail. The puzzle is solved, and Hercule Poirot returns to London, content." The train station bustled with early travelers, and Poirot, ever observant, noted the faces around him. Ordinary, yet each a potential story. As the train pulled away, carrying him toward the Channel, he gazed at the receding spires of Amsterdam, the city fading into the snowy haze. The winter gardens, with their beauty and their secrets, were behind him, but their memory lingered, a testament to the power of reason over chaos. He closed his eyes, the rhythm of the train soothing his mind. "The truth," he whispered. "It always blooms, like a flower in the frost." And with that, Hercule Poirot leaned back, ready for whatever mystery awaited him next.